Can't share your way out of imposter syndrome.
Where you worry that your success isn't real or that you've just been lucky. One study suggests that up to 70% of the population experiences imposter syndrome at some point in their career.
Imposter syndrome is created in childhood when our parents deny our authentic self. They do this by shaming us and shaming that authentic self because they're trying to control us into becoming what they want. When a person is experiencing imposter syndrome, they're having a massive shame attack. We're experiencing what is called carried shame.
Imposter syndrome doesn't care about the truth. It doesn't matter whether you have the title, whether you have years of experience, whether everybody around you is telling you how amazing you are. The reality is, imposter syndrome, in fact, it's even more likely to crop up the more evidence you have around you of how great and how deserving you are. It doesn't care about the facts. It's only interested in reminding you and making you feel like a fraud.
The Impostor Syndrome Summit for the 15th of June. Today is an amazing day. We have an amazing guest speaker who is going to explain how he managed to stay away from donuts for the last 17 years. But more on that later. Let me read his bio. Kris Kelso is a keynote speaker, a two-time entrepreneur, a professional certified coach, and is the author of Overcoming the Impostor, Silence Your Inner Critique and Lead with Confidence. Kris has worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, business owners, and their leadership teams as a coach, facilitator, and mentor. He is a faculty instructor at the Professional Christian Coaching Institute, an advisor and instructor at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and is a contributing writer for Fast Company magazine, Yahoo Finance, and the Nashville Business Journal. Kris has founded multiple companies and has served on the boards of directors of several nonprofit organizations. He lives with his wife and 3 teenage sons in the suburb of Nashville, Tennessee. Kris, welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Summit. Today is your day. So I'll start by asking you to tell me how you did that, because I cannot stay away from donuts.
Well, it was a kind of an interesting trial experiment. I was working at a company years ago that was right down the street from a donut shop. And every week, at least once a week, somebody would bring in a box of donuts, and there was donuts all the time. And at the time, I was trying to think about ways to be healthier, but I hate dieting. I hate the idea of counting calories and living by a strict diet. And so I had this idea of, what if I just picked one really bad thing and cut it out completely, and I'll just be a little bit healthier. And so because there was donuts everywhere, I thought, I'm going to see if I can go 1 year without eating a donut. And I did. I went a year. And then I thought, well, that wasn't that hard. Maybe I'll go another year. And then it was another year and another year. And eventually it became this streak where I'm not going to break now a 17-year streak for one donut.
No.
There's no donut that's worth that record. So now it's not even really a temptation. I see them and I go, yeah, that's just not something I eat. And I don't even worry about it.
Congratulations. I wish I had your...
Well, let me be clear. Let me be clear that I eat cakes and pies and brownies and all kinds of other things. I still get some really great food and get to treat myself. I just, it was one of those things that I thought I would try and see. And now I'm thinking, gosh, I got to go at least 20 years. Now I'm this close. So we'll see what happens after that.
All right. So my first question for each speaker is, what is your personal experience with imposter syndrome?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've been an entrepreneur for most of my career, but I was in my early 30s when I started my first business, and I had no business training whatsoever when I did that. In fact, I don't even have a college degree. I never went to college. So and that's a whole nother part of my story that we won't get into. But I remember going to a large bookstore and buying a stack of books covering anything and everything that I thought I needed to know to run a consulting business, which is what I had started. Finance and marketing and sales and contracts. And, I just read a bunch of books and got to work. And those first few years in business, I was learning so much because almost everything I was doing for the first time. And I really loved to learn. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a lot. But there was always this sort of persistent nagging voice in the back of my head that was telling me there's something you should know that you don't know. Or people are going to figure out that you're just making it up as you go and you don't actually know what you're doing. And so I always worried about being discovered. I those first few years especially, I was afraid to admit that I didn't have a college degree because I thought suddenly everybody go, what are you doing here? Why do you have the right to run this business when you don't have a college degree? And so that was my experience in those first few years in business with imposter syndrome. Now, I didn't know what to call it at that time. I just knew I had this self-doubt, and I spent a lot of energy, emotional and mental energy, trying to protect my image and guard my reputation and make sure that I didn't say or do the wrong thing. But many years later, when I learned about imposter syndrome, it was like a huge relief and a weight lifted off my shoulders to know that A, it's a thing, that psychologists have identified it and lots of people have wrestled with it. And secondly, B, that it tends to be more prevalent among high achievers, which means that it's actually a good sign. When you have self-doubt, it's actually a positive sign because it really only happens to people that are pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone, that are trying new things, that are working towards something. And so once I learned that and realized, then I became fascinated with it. And I started to study just for myself initially, and then eventually talking to some of my clients and colleagues and other entrepreneurs about it. And eventually, as you know, I wrote a book on the subject and have been now speaking about it professionally for several years.
So in your experience, is there a link between organizational culture and imposter syndrome?
This is a good question. And I think that there is a link. I don't think it's the only link. Like, I don't think that imposter syndrome is caused by just one thing. But I do believe that organizational cultures where it is not safe to be vulnerable and where mistakes are punished and people feel like they have to protect and sweep their mistakes under the rug and hide their mistakes. I think those are organizations that feed insecurity and they breed that feeling of being an imposter because everybody has to wear a mask and everybody has to play a part and pretend that they have it all together when in actuality they're still struggling in some areas and they're figuring some things out and maybe making some mistakes along the way, but they don't feel safe to acknowledge that. So the culture of an organization definitely plays a big factor into whether imposter syndrome is very prevalent or, on the other hand, whether it's openly discussed and then quieted and quelled, because a big part of overcoming imposter syndrome is to be open about it and to have open dialogue about people's struggles and fears. And so the culture can make a difference as to whether that sort of that imposter temperature is turned way, way up or is turned down over time.
Sorry, we appear to have a slight delay between us. So,
that's okay.
Just to let you know about that.
This is what happens when we talk on opposite sides of the world.
Last question. Yes. Yes, very true. So is it a personal responsibility or should it be an organizational responsibility to help support people with personal development on issues like imposter syndrome? Because imposter syndrome is very personal. And many people tend to not want to get found out. So they are not likely to talk about it. What is your opinion on that? Is it a personal journey or can an organization become a part of the solution?
I think it is a very personal journey, but that doesn't mean that organizations can't and shouldn't play a part and in fact support and contribute to the development of people's self-confidence and to them overcoming. I think it's really great when an organization will call out something like imposter syndrome and say, hey, we know, statistically speaking, we know that people struggle with this. Even if we're not seeing it and hearing it, even if nobody's asking about it, statistics tell us that people struggle with insecurity and they're worried about their reputation. And if we can just call that out and have an open conversation and then even give people tools and resources to overcome that as an organization, you're only going to make your organization better by doing that. And in fact, I think there's a strong case to be made that organizations will be more productive and more effective if they deal with this issue, because the energy and effort that people spend managing their image and protecting their reputation and trying to cover their perceived flaws and mistakes can be better allocated to actually doing the work of the business of the organization, to serving customers and to innovating and to thinking creatively. And there's all kinds of reasons that imposter syndrome, it holds back individuals, but then the collective result is it holds back organizations. So whether or not it's a responsibility of an organization, I don't know, but I think it's certainly an opportunity that organizations have to make things better and to actually reap the rewards of building the confidence of the people in their organization.
In what ways does a person develop a negative inner critique? And how does this inner critic grow imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think all of us have some version of an inner critic. You know, many people say I am my own worst critic. And I don't think that's all bad. To be self-reflective and to analyze yourself, you know, the opposite of an inner critic, or maybe a person without an inner critic, is a narcissist. They just believe that everything they do is wonderful and it's perfect and they can make no mistakes. And we certainly don't want to go there, and I don't want to encourage people to go there. So it's not a matter of getting rid of your inner critic. It's a matter of managing it and making sure that it plays the role that it should play and doesn't dominate your thinking and your life and your conversation, and that you don't let it lie to you. You don't let that inner critic overblow the mistakes that you make and overemphasize your flaws or shortcomings or weaknesses. And you don't let it convince you that your flaw is the fatal flaw and your mistake is the one that's going to be a black mark on your record forever and sink you. And so when that inner critic's voice starts to get loud and strong, and it's not counteracted by both positive self-talk, our own speaking, as well as the right people around us, being surrounded by a healthy community, people from mentors and peers, and even mentees that we work with and help to develop and guide along the way, who can reset our perspective and help us to take that inner critic and put it in its proper place and see those criticisms and those theories in their proper light. So it's about diminishing the influence of that inner critic and making sure that it doesn't become the dominant voice in our heads.
You also talk about changing your way of thinking in your book and battling the voice inside your head. How do you start this process?
Well, it's a series of mindset shifts. And I'll just give you one or two of them right now. One big one is that we reframe failure as learning. So if you see life and work and the things that you do as there's two possible outcomes, there's success and there's failure, and success is good and failure is bad, and I have to avoid failure at all costs, then you're going to be really risk averse and you're going to be really careful, and you're only going to try things where the chances of success is very high and the risk of failure is very low. And that inner critic will tell you that if you have a failure, and especially if you have a public failure, then people are going to lose respect for you. You're going to lose credibility. You're going to lose your position. You're going to be shamed and embarrassed, and it's going to be your downfall. But if we instead see failure as learning, and we recognize, and I have a whole chapter on this concept in my book about the fact that no success happens easily and automatically. In fact, failure and success are not opposites. They're closely related, because most success comes from the learnings that we gain through failure, through experimenting. There are famous examples like Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, and he had thousands of failed experiments trying to create the light bulb. But he said, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just figured out 10,000 ways that it doesn't work. And when I figure out the one way that it does work, I'll have succeeded. And so he saw failure as the stepping stone to success. It's part of the process. And we learn a lot more from failure than we do from success. And that learning often leads to or becomes the building blocks that we use to create our success. And so I've developed a mantra whenever I try something new, that I have one of two outcomes. There's two possibilities when I try something new, when I take a risk. And those two possibilities are I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to learn. And either one of those is a good outcome. Because in my mind, failure is only truly failure if you learn nothing. And so as long as you learn something, it's a step towards success. It may not be the success you want. It may not be the entire journey of success, but it's a step in that direction, and you draw from it in order to take the next step. So this is an example of one of the mindset shifts that you have to really begin to process, and then you have to make it a practice. It's not enough just to hear that and say, oh yeah, I'll think about it differently. You have to build the discipline of viewing failure through a completely different lens so that you no longer fear it. And then when that voice, that inner critic that I call the impostor, creeps up in your mind and says, don't take that risk because there's a risk of failure there, you change that to, oh, you mean there's a risk of learning? Well, that's not such a bad thing. I think I'll give that a try.
In the same strain, about definition of success. If the culture that you work in has one definition of success, how do you redefine success for yourself?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's this is one of those cases where you may be able to influence the culture of the organization you're in, depending on at what level you are and how much influence you carry, but you probably can't fix it. You probably can't change it for good. And so you have to operate in two modes. One where you're working within the culture and the definition of the environment that you're in to the best of your abilities. And that is sometimes not ideal. But where you also separately create your own definition of success for yourself. And then you put more credence, you put more of your self-confidence and more of your enjoyment of your work in your own definition of success, and draw less of that from your organization's definition of success. And if those two things are so far apart that it becomes difficult for you to function, if that cognitive dissonance becomes too much to handle, then maybe you need to change environments. Maybe you need to change your work situation. You need to look for a different organization to be a part of. But to the degree that you can create your own definition and rely more on that than your organization's definition of success, and just sort of work with and adapt to what they require of you, you can draw your confidence and your joy, your happiness from your own definition of success. And that's something that I actually have worked on a lot, is creating my own and helping other people create their own personal definition of success so that it's independent of what anybody else is doing. We don't have to worry about what other people's dreams and goals and the things that they're pursuing and even the skills that they're developing or the journey that they're on. we focus on creating our own definition of success, getting really clear on that, and then executing that plan and working towards what's important to us as individuals. And that way we don't have to draw our self-confidence from measuring ourselves against somebody else's plan and somebody else's goals.
So I think it takes quite the willpower, and also a journey of knowing yourself, knowing your
Yes.
limits, your vulnerabilities, and being open to inserting those to your journey of success. You've also spoken about a balanced life. Many
Yeah.
people with imposter syndrome are seeking to achieve as much as possible within a set time or a given time. So, what advice can you give a person with imposter syndrome on the steps they can take to establish this work-life balance?
So I have a personal pet peeve about the term work-life balance, because I think it poses, or it assumes that work and life are in conflict with one another. That those are two things that are opposite ends that you have to somehow mediate between them. And I take a more of a viewpoint that work is an integral part of life. It's an important part of life, but it's not the whole life. And so I tend to focus just on life balance, which includes work, but not that work and life have to be balanced against one another. So for me, that's about getting really clear on your values and your priorities, then getting clear on your relationships and who is important to you and the commitments that you make, and then managing your time and your money and your energy and all of the resources that we have with those deeper, more meaningful things like values and priorities in mind. And so it's a process of not letting our calendar and our finances and our energy dictate what we do and how much of those things, where we apply those resources, but being really thoughtful and purposeful about how much time am I going to spend on my career versus how much time I'm going to spend with my family versus how much time I'm going to spend on personal development and health and keeping myself mentally and emotionally and physically fit. And then how much time I might apply to a cause or a ministry or a organization that's really important to me that I want to be of service to. And so finding balance across all those different areas is the key. And that's not a one-time event. That's an ongoing management effort, because balance changes. The definition of what's in balance changes throughout different seasons of life. You know, I have 3 teenage boys, and they're in 2 of them in high school and one of them that's graduated from high school. And when they were younger, I had a different level of commitment to family life and being there present as a father for my kids. And not that I'm not present and available now, but they're mostly independent. They have jobs, they're working, they're gone a lot. And so what was balanced 10 years ago is different than what is balanced for me today. And it'll be different 10 years from now. And so that's not something you achieve and then you've gotten there. It's more of an ongoing effort to manage. And one last thing I'll say about balance, I think of balance not as a static posture, but I think of it in terms of riding a bike. If you're riding a bicycle, you're balancing, but you're never perfectly in balance. You're constantly making little micro adjustments. You're shifting your weight and you're leaning into turns and you're leaning forward at times or back, or you're adjusting to maintain balance because you're in motion. You're moving. You're not just sitting still, perfectly balanced on some pedestal. And so because we're people in motion, because our lives are moving and we're doing things and we're accomplishing things and there's change all around us, I see balance as an ongoing management effort, just like those 1,000 micro adjustments that you make while you're riding a bike down the street rather than something to be achieved and then you're done.
You work as an instructor for Professional Christian Coaching Institute. So I
Yes, I
guess
do.
my question is, as a Christian, have you found that people who are suffering from imposter syndrome benefit with their spiritual journey being stronger, or it has absolutely no link in your opinion?
This is a really good question, and I appreciate you asking it because there is a link. There's absolutely a link because it really depends on, imposter syndrome. A lot of it is about where do you draw your confidence and where do you get your self-worth from? And so I think that a big part of that is understanding your purpose, the reason you were made. I talked about you need to have your own definition of success and not be chasing someone else's definition of success. Well, a foundational component of that for me is understanding my purpose, understanding why I'm here. And I think that you can only truly know your purpose. You can really only learn that through a relationship with your creator, because the purpose of a thing is not decided by the thing. It's decided by the one who made the thing, who created it for a purpose. And so faith is, for me, an absolute foundational component of understanding why I'm here, what my purpose is, and then deriving my value from the one who gave me value.
Deriving your value from the one that gave you value. I love that. So you have worked with many entrepreneurs. Yesterday, I was speaking to Dr. Valerie Young. She's the founder of the Impostor Syndrome Institute. And she was actually happy to know that men are not only coaching others, but are reporting their need for coaching, which is something that she sees as a shift. So my question is, have you found that men are secretly suffering from imposter syndrome as much as women? Do you think it's the same across the board? Or do you feel that women are just more vocal about it?
Yeah, you're hitting on a lot of the key themes there, because in my research, my studies, I found a lot of different studies that have been done and research projects on imposter syndrome. And there is this misconception that it is mostly a women's problem, largely because the early research in the 70s on imposter syndrome was only focused on women. However, many studies since then have shown that men and women experience imposter syndrome almost equally. It's pretty much statistically the same across the board. And furthermore, that it crosses cultural boundaries, it crosses economic boundaries and social status and all of those things. So it's not a woman's problem, it's a human problem. However, as you sort of noted there, women do tend to be more willing to open up and talk about it. And so as I was learning this for myself, and then again, as I said, I was talking to other entrepreneurs and clients and colleagues and people that I knew, I saw men and women both equally saying that they struggled with imposter syndrome when I would talk to them privately, when I would interact. But most of the books that have been written, most of the speakers that have been talking about imposter syndrome until just recently have been women. And this is one of the reasons that I felt compelled that I needed to write this book and I needed to speak on this topic, because I want people to know that men deal with this too. Men can be insecure. Men can struggle with self-doubt. And we need to stop thinking of it as just a woman's issue. It's a human issue. In my book, I tell lots of stories of entrepreneurs that I've met and interacted with and interviewed, and even some of my clients. And there's a good mix of men and women in the book. And it may even skew a little more male. There may be a few more male stories than there were female stories. And I remember having a conversation with my publisher when we were getting ready to publish the book. And they said, should we even this out a little bit? Should we change a few of these stories of men to women? because, we changed some of the names anyway to protect people's identities and things like that. So we could just, let's make this story a woman instead of a man. And I said, no, I don't want to do that, because I would be doing my women readers a disservice if I make too many of the stories about women and I don't make sure to emphasize and illustrate that men struggle with this too. So for the most part, as far as I can remember in the book, I think we kept all of the genders the same as what the real stories were. And we changed some of the names, as I said, and some of the company details to protect some of my clients and things like that. But I just said, if it's a story about a man, I'm going to tell the story about a man, because I want people to know that this is an issue that crosses those boundaries. And from both the research I've read and the work that I've done with individuals, it is pretty much the same across the board.
Speaking of Dr. Valerie Young, her question to you is, since men tend not to come forward with needing assistance or coaching often, are there ways you might coach men experiencing imposter syndrome differently from women experiencing the same?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think as a coach, what I try to do is as much as I can adapt my coaching style to my client. And so I'll take this broader than just a man-woman question for just a moment, and then we'll zoom in there. I try to take into account my client's personality, their behavioral style, their communication style. I will adapt to a more extroverted client or a more introverted client. I will, try to make sure that I'm matching them as much as I can so that I make them as comfortable as possible. So, and I do that not just to make them comfortable. I don't want to make it sound like comfort is the main goal. It's really so that they can do their best work, so that they can think freely, so that they feel, totally at ease, talking openly and being transparent and candid. So when it comes to this question of men versus women, how would I deal with it differently? Well, I would say that because women tend to be more open and honest about imposter syndrome, I might be a little more direct about it with a woman, especially if she has brought up that I struggle with this and I want to talk about this. Whereas with a man, maybe I use different terminology, right? Maybe I don't talk about imposter syndrome specifically or self-doubt, but I talk about fear or worry or hesitancy or what's holding you back, what are the obstacles, and so we may get into some of those topics without explicitly addressing it unless he is willing to call it out and go there. Now that's not something that I feel like I've had to do a lot. Most people, because I wrote a book on imposter syndrome, if they come to me for coaching on this topic, and this is not the only thing that I coach people on and not the only thing that I work with business owners on, but if they're coming to me with this in mind, they're usually going to be pretty open and forthright about it because they know that I've written a book, they know that I recognize the signs, and they know that I have some expertise in this area.
Speaking of your coaching programs, tell us about that and how people can get to work with you.
Thank you. So I work mostly with small business owners, occasionally with their leadership teams, both as a group. I facilitate full day sessions with leadership teams, a lot of quarterly strategic planning and annual planning and some team building and communication and problem solving. But I work a lot one-on-one with business owners and with senior executives in companies from a wide range of sizes. I also work as a professional speaker, mostly talking about imposter syndrome at conferences and corporate events. And I'm just in the process of rolling out an online course about overcoming the imposter. So I have a group actually doing the beta of the course right now, and I'm going to be unveiling that. It is actually available on the website if somebody wanted to look at it right now, but certainly over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to start to really promote this course that I've spent the last 9 months developing. And we really go deep with some exercises and introspection and some work to, uproot where some of that self-doubt comes from and what are those mindset shifts and those habits that you need to develop and change. And I help in that course each person build their own personal definition of success, as we talked about a little bit ago. As far as finding me, I'm at kriskelso.com, and I'm easy to find if you remember that my name starts with a K, K-R-I-S. And I'm Kris Kelso on most of the social platforms. And then you can specifically find out about the book and the course and other materials at overcomingtheimpostor.com.
All right. So if you're watching this on the replay, you can check the video description for this interview. I'm going to put all of Mr. Kelso's links there, as well as in the first pinned comment, so you can never miss it. And watch out for that course launch. I think it's really important to start your journey on imposter syndrome on the right footing. So we have come to the end, and I want to say thank you for coming on. I have one last question, and this is you asking a question to tomorrow's speaker. Her name is Athena Danilo. She is an imposter syndrome coach and author. What would you like her to answer?
Well, I know that she is a family and marriage counselor. She's done some family and relationship counseling. And so this is actually a question that people have asked me that I don't have a great answer for, because I don't have that specific expertise. So I'm going to pose to her, how do you see imposter syndrome showing up in romantic relationships? And what effect does that have there?
How do you see imposter syndrome showing up in romantic relationships? Yes, I think that that's a good question, because many people think it's just professional, in professional circles, that imposter syndrome comes up. So yeah, that's a great question. Would you like to add anything else before we let you go?
Well, I think that, I'll leave you with a quick tip. One of the most common symptoms of imposter syndrome is the inability to accept a compliment at face value. And so what we do is someone says, "Hey, I really enjoyed your work," or "Hey, Coach Mary, I loved that seminar, that summit that you put on, and those interviews, you did a great job." And the tendency for many of us, and I've struggled with this, is to downplay the compliment or deflect it or make a joke or, use sarcasm as a defense mechanism. And we downplay. And I had this realization as I was writing this book and kind of developing some of these concepts, that when someone pays you a compliment and you downplay it or deflect it or make a joke about it, you're actually insulting that person. They have handed you a gift. They've told you that they appreciate you. They've given you something great, and you have said, I don't want it. It doesn't mean that much to me. Or you've told them that your opinion doesn't matter. You don't know what you're talking about. Your standards are low. And so we insult the giver. And when I realized that, I thought, oh my goodness, I have to stop that. I have to stop that dead in my tracks. And so I have developed a practice, and I encourage my readers, and when I speak at conferences, I say, the next time someone pays you a compliment, here's what I want you to do. I want you to plant your feet, look them in the eye, smile, and say, thank you. I worked really hard on that, and it's nice to know that my work is appreciated. And that's it. No jokes, no downplaying, no deflection. Just accept it and own it, and reward the giver of that gift with your appreciation. Honor them for what they've done for you, and then accept the compliment and take it and own it and believe it. And it'll actually start to build your confidence. We sabotage ourselves so often in this imposter syndrome mind game, because the good things and the evidence that we get that we're successful, we downplay and deflect while we play up those inner criticisms that we have playing in our head. And so when someone pays you a compliment, I'm challenging all of you, listeners, watchers, viewers, I'm challenging you, don't deflect or downplay. Just accept it, be grateful for it, and then own it.
That is a personal challenge for me, because I do that a lot. I never thought of it that way. as an insult to the person who's given it to me, but I think that I'm going to start pinching myself from now on. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your expertise, your information, your tips. We truly, truly appreciate.
You are so welcome. And thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed being a part of this, and this was a great conversation.
Thank you. So we have come to the end of our talk with Kris. So tomorrow, as we said, we are going to be having Athena Danilo as the speaker. Make sure that you catch that interview. It's going to be same time, which is 6 p.m. CT and 7 p.m. EST time. So you don't want to miss it. If you have questions for her, send them in, post them in the comments, and let's get rid of imposter syndrome as an obstacle. It's not a bad thing. It is the one thing that can help you refocus. And this is a personal journey that you must take. So don't drop it, don't let it go. Once again, check the description for this video for all the links for Kris Kelso, for his book, for his website, his coaching programs, and make sure you leave a comment. He's on social media as Kris Kelso with a K. So let's connect.